announcement today marks the beginning of a new approach to conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. This act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate only 6 months ago. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Presidents issued these waivers under the belief that delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace. Some say they lacked courage, but they made their best judgments based on facts as they understood them at the time. Nevertheless, the record is in. After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Acknowledging this is a fact is a necessary condition for achieving peace. It was 70 years ago that the United States, under President Truman, recognized the State of Israel. Ever since then, Israel has made its capital in the city of Jerusalem, the capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. Today, Jerusalem is the seat of the modern Israeli government. It is the home of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, as well as the Israeli Supreme Court. It is the location of the official residence of the Prime Minister and the President. It is the headquarters of many government ministries. For decades, visiting American presidents, secretaries of state, and military leaders have met their Israeli counterparts in Jerusalem, as I did on my trip to Israel earlier this year. Jerusalem is not just the heart of 3 great religions, but it is now also the heart of one of the most successful democracies in the world. Over the past 7 decades, the Israeli people have built a country where Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths are free to live and worship according to their conscience and according to their beliefs. Jerusalem is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall, where Christians walk the stations of the cross, and where Muslims worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, through all of these years, presidents representing the United States have declined to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In fact, We have declined to acknowledge any Israeli capital at all. But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace. In making these announcements, I also want to make one point very clear. This decision is not intended in any way to reflect a departure from our strong commitment to facilitate a lasting peace agreement. We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved. The United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. I intend to do everything in my power to help forge such an agreement. Without question, Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in those talks. The United States would support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides. In the meantime, I call on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace, the universal yearning in every human soul. With today's action, I reaffirm my administration's longstanding commitment to a future of peace and security for the region. There will, of course, be disagreement and dissent regarding this announcement. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation. This sacred city should call forth the best in humanity, lifting our sights to what it is possible, not pulling us back and down to the old fights that have become so totally predictable. Peace is never beyond the grasp of those willing to reach it. So today we call for calm, for moderation, and for the voices of tolerance to prevail over the purveyors of hate. Our children should inherit our love, not our conflicts. I repeat the message I delivered at the historic and extraordinary summit in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. The Middle East is a region rich with culture, spirit, and history. Its people are brilliant, proud, and diverse, vibrant, and strong. But the incredible future awaiting this region is held at bay by bloodshed, ignorance, and terror. Vice President Pence will travel to the region in the coming days to reaffirm our commitment to work with partners throughout the Middle East to defeat radicalism that threatens the hopes and dreams of future generations. It is time for the many who desire peace to expel the extremists from their midst. It is time for all civilized nations and people to respond to disagreement with reasoned debate, not violence. And it is time for young and moderate voices all across the Middle East to claim for themselves a bright and beautiful future. So today, let us rededicate ourselves to a path of mutual understanding and respect. Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So you're seeing live pictures there of Donald Trump, who has just signed an order moving the U.S. to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This was a decision that had been rumored for a while. It was confirmed yesterday, and we've just seen President Trump making his formal announcement. I'm Maté with The Real News. This is a decision that is going to stoke protest in both the occupied territories and likely the broader Middle East. Palestinian factions have already called for 3 days of rage, 3 days of protest over this decision. Trump saying in his speech that he wants to still advance the peace process and talking about how he thinks that Israel has the right to determine its capital. And that is why, part of the reason why he is moving ahead with recognizing Jerusalem as the capital. And just as a way of some historical background, Israel occupied Jerusalem in 1967. The world does not recognize its occupation of East Jerusalem, and the consensus amongst pretty much everyone is that East Jerusalem would be the future capital of an eventual Palestinian state. And for Trump to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital now is to officially give the U.S. stamp of approval on Israel's occupation of also East Jerusalem. Now, Trump says this move does not prejudice the outcome of final status negotiations over Jerusalem's fate, but certainly a decision like this, and this is something that Ali Abunimah of the Electronic Intifada told me yesterday, is going to embolden the most far-right factions inside Israel, like the Temple Mount movement, who see all of Jerusalem as belonging to Israel and have been staging a number of provocative actions to push Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem. So I want to go actually to a clip of Ali. He is the founder of the Electronic Intifada, and I spoke to him yesterday about Trump's decision on Jerusalem.
And it's a recognition of a reality that the United States has helped to create of Israeli control and occupation and incremental ethnic cleansing in Jerusalem to force the Palestinians out, to cleanse the identity of Jerusalem from its Muslim and Christian aspects, and to market Israel as an exclusively Jewish and Israeli city. So the U.S. is creating the reality that it claims to be recognizing.
That's Ali Abunimah, co-founder of the Electronic Intifada. Trump also talked about amplifying, quote, the voices of tolerance in his speech. But as I said, this is a measure that is going to encourage the voices of intolerance inside Israel. There are groups who have been going to the Temple Mount for a long time. The Temple Mount is the area of where Palestinians have their holy mosque as well, and Jewish extremists have been going there to assert Israeli sovereignty over the entire Temple Mount, and which has led to protests. And just earlier this year, we saw days of Palestinian nonviolent protests when, after Israel tried to crack down on Palestinian access to the Temple Mount, Palestinians took to the streets to defend their rights to access the site, and they won in a huge victory for nonviolent protests. So it's just interesting to hear when Trump talks about amplifying the voices of tolerance, how for him to go and recognize all of Jerusalem as Israel's capital when nobody recognizes the occupation of East Jerusalem, that is something that is going to be emboldening the voices of intolerance, at least inside of Israel. Let's go to more of Ali Abu Nima of the Electronic Intifada.
Just months after Mahmoud Abbas stood side by side with Donald Trump out of at the White House and praised the quote-unquote wisdom of Donald Trump and said, "Mr. President, with you we have hope." It really is a sort of yet another humiliation for Abbas. But look, I don't think it will change their approach. I heard PA officials today in media saying how this undermines the position of the United States as an honest broker. I mean, who but the most deluded person could have ever thought the United States was an honest broker and that you only needed this to somehow make the U.S. seem biased?
So that's Ali Abu Nima, co-founder of the Electronic Intifada, and he's talking about the quandary that this decision puts Mahmoud Abbas in. He's the president of the Palestinian Authority. For a long time, the PA has been relying on U.S. support to survive. It's not very popular, especially Abbas is not very popular. He's been in power for way past his mandate. But now here's Trump even making this symbolic move that is incredibly insulting to Palestinians. And it's going to be even harder for Abbas to convince his people that the U.S. is a partner that they can deal with, which is part of the premise for his rule. He's the one who says, I'm the person who can deal with the West and get us our own state. Well, here's Trump saying to them that we're going to give Israel recognition of Jerusalem and give it something that is a very contentious issue for Palestinians and a very important one, because Jerusalem is the center, effectively, for Palestinian life in the occupied West Bank. And so what does Abbas do now? Does he cut off ties with the U.S., or does he keep playing ball and pretending as if the U.S. is a reliable partner? That will be one thing to watch. And meanwhile, there is the Saudi angle as well. Saudi Arabia has pretty much openly joined Trump and Netanyahu in trying to pressure Abbas into accepting the longtime U.S. terms for a peace deal, which is effectively keeping the major Israeli settlement blocks in the West Bank, giving Palestinians no right of return, no apology for the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during the war for Israel's creation in 1948. And also on Jerusalem, the longtime Israeli plan has been to give Palestinians limited sovereignty or limited autonomy in some areas of Jerusalem, but they've previously offered them the chance to rename a adjacent village Al-Quds, the Arabic name for Jerusalem, but not actually give Palestinians control of East Jerusalem itself. And that is apparently part of this new Saudi plan that the Saudi Arabia is now on board with to try to convince Abbas to take. That being part of Saudi Arabia and Israel's alliance to team up on Iran, because if they can get Palestinians out of the way, that'll be easier to confront Iran. And when I spoke to Ali, we talked about these issues as well, the Saudi role, the Saudi context here when it comes to Israel and Palestine.
One thing that's important to note that's different now is the regional context, where you have this Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is pressuring the Palestinians to accept things that even Abbas can't accept, And the motivation there is to liquidate the Palestinian cause and push it aside as an issue that stands in the way of a full consummation of the Saudi-Israeli alliance, whose main target is this obsessive enmity that Israel and Saudi Arabia have towards Iran. And the Palestinians are the sacrificial lamb in that. And in this sense, Jerusalem can be seen as the Saudi dowry or wedding gift to Israel.
That's Ali Abunimah, co-founder of the Electronic Intifada. And there's one important development that recently happened that says a lot about Trump's decision today, which is that on Friday, when Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was indicted, we learned a lot in his indictment about collusion with the foreign government. But it's not collusion with the foreign government that we've all been talking about for the past year. Russia, it was actually Trump team collusion with Israel. We learned from the Flynn indictment, or at least confirmed new details of the fact that before Trump took office, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked the Trump campaign for its help in subverting one of President Obama's last major foreign policy decisions. Obama, in December 2016, decided that he was going to reverse his own policy and allow the UN Security Council to condemn the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Previously, Obama had vetoed such measures. Now, Obama did not decide to vote yes on this condemnation, but he decided to abstain on it, which then allows it to go through. So Netanyahu, we learn now from Flynn's indictment, asked the Trump team to go to work and undermine it. And so as part of Flynn's efforts, he reached out to the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, and asked Russia to veto the measure. Russia said no, and in fact actually voted for it, as did many other countries who rejected the Trump team's efforts. And what's interesting is that this is a revelation of direct collusion between Trump and a foreign government. But because the foreign government is Israel, it has not gotten very much attention. And the collusion is so brazen and actually so bipartisan that even Democrats have said nothing about it. And in fact, a top Democratic donor has openly applauded the Trump team for it. So I want to go to a clip of Haim Saban, who is a billionaire Democratic donor, speaking on Sunday with Jared Kushner, the Trump senior advisor and the guy who is overseeing the quote-unquote Middle East peace process, at a public event on Sunday where Saban thanked Kushner for the Trump team's efforts.
To be honest with you, some people might criticize, as far as I know, there's nothing illegal there, but I think that this crowd and myself want to thank you for making that effort. So thank you very much.
So that's Haim Saban publicly thanking Jared Kushner on Sunday. We're going to wrap, but we have had one question come in, so I'm going to answer it. Philip Jacobson asks, who should Israel belong to if not Israel? Okay, the problem there, though, is that Israel is illegally occupying East Jerusalem. So nobody recognizes Israel's occupation of East Jerusalem. There was a war in '67. Israel took over East Jerusalem from Jordan. There's a UN resolution 242, which calls on Israel to withdraw from the territories it occupied in '67. So the long-standing formulation has been that as part of a future peace deal, if there is ever going to be a two-state solution, that Israel would get West Jerusalem and the Palestinians would get East Jerusalem as their respective capitals. That's what most people agree on. And so to answer your question, my take is that Jerusalem is not Israel's to claim as its own. Nobody recognizes the right to acquire territory by force. And if there's going to be a final recognition of Israeli sovereignty of Jerusalem, it should be done through negotiation, but it doesn't start with recognizing the right of acquiring territory by force. So that's my attempt to answer your question, Philip. We're going to have more analysis. I'll be speaking later to Rami Khouri, the Middle East analyst, of the American University in Beirut, and we'll be posting that tonight at therealnews.com. I will sign off now. Thanks for tuning in to The Real News. I'm Aaron Maté.